Here's a simple question. Take a second. Don't overthink it. A bat and a ball together cost $1.10. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? If you said 10 cents, you're wrong. And that mistake, that tiny, instant, confident mistake, is exactly what this book is about. Welcome to a deep dive into one of the most important books ever written about the human mind, Thinking Fast and Slow by Nobel Prize winning psychologist Daniel Kahneman. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. I've heard about this book, biases, heuristics, yeah. But I promise you, by the end of this video, you are going to look at your own decisions, your own thoughts, and your own life in a fundamentally different way. This book took Kahneman decades to research and write. We're going to distill the most powerful, life-changing ideas into about 35 minutes. Buckle up. The correct answer. The ball costs 5 cents, not 10. If the ball equals 10 cents, the bat equals $1.10, and together equals $1.20. But the bat costs $1 more than the ball. So, ball equals 5 cents, bat equals $1.05, total equals $1.10. Your brain jumped to 10 cents automatically. That's System 1 in action.
Kahneman tells us something profound early in this book. Our minds are not the rational, logical computers we think they are. We are overconfident. We are lazy thinkers. We are slaves to our gut feelings far more than we realize. And the scary part? Most of the time, we don't even know it's happening. Whether you're making investment decisions, choosing a career, picking a partner, or just deciding what to eat for dinner, the architecture of your mind is pulling strings you cannot see. Understanding how you think is the first step to thinking better. And that's what we're here for today. Before we dive deep, let me give you the roadmap for today's video. Here's exactly what we're going to explore together in the next minutes.
6 important things. 1. System 1, the fast, automatic mind. 2. System 2, the slow, deliberate thinker. 3. Cognitive biases that run your life. 4. Prospect theory and loss aversion. 5. The two selves, experiencing versus remembering. 6. How to use this knowledge in real life. So here is the central framework of the entire book. And once you get this, everything else clicks into place. Kahneman proposes that we have 2 systems of thought operating inside our heads simultaneously. He calls them simply System 1 and System 2. These aren't literal brain structures, they're characters, 2 different modes of thinking that run the show of your life. System 1 is fast, it's automatic, it's emotional. It runs in the background, constantly, without any effort from you. It's what helps you read these words without sounding out each letter. It's what makes you slam on the brakes before you've consciously decided to. It makes quick judgments and associations in milliseconds. System 2 is slow. It's deliberate. It's effortful. It's what you use to do mental math, to write a cover letter, to make a careful decision. But here's the catch. System 2 is lazy. It doesn't want to work, and System 1 knows it. The key insight of the book. System 1 is constantly sending suggestions to System 2. Impressions, intuitions, feelings. Most of the time, System 2 just endorses them without checking.
A quick note on the author before we go deeper. Daniel Kahneman is not just any psychologist. He's one of the most cited academic psychologists in history. He won the Nobel Prize in economics. Remarkable for a man who openly says he barely took economics in school. He spent his career studying how people make decisions, mostly alongside his close friend and collaborator Amos Tversky, whose story is also woven through this book. This This isn't a feel-good self-help book. It's a scientific, rigorous, sometimes uncomfortable mirror held up to the way all of us, including experts, CEOs, judges, and doctors, make mistakes every single day. To truly bridge the gap between watching a video and mastering these results, you need the full blueprint in your hands. I've linked the original book below so you can claim the exact techniques and hidden insights that didn't make it into the summary. Let's start with System 1.
System 1, the fast, automatic mind. Imagine you're driving home after a long day of work. It's a familiar route. You've driven it hundreds of times. You're thinking about an argument you had with your boss. You're mentally replaying it, maybe even saying the things you wished you'd said. And then, you're in your driveway. You don't remember making any turns. You don't remember stopping at red lights or yielding to pedestrians. Your hands moved. Your feet pressed the pedals. Your eyes saw the road. And you consciously remember almost none of it. Who was driving? System 1. Let's take an example. Automatic versus effortful. Try this right now. What is 2 plus 2? You didn't need to think. It just appeared. Now try, what is 17 times 24? You had to pause, shift gears, maybe even furrow your brow. That shift from ease to effort is the exact boundary between System 1 and System 2. System 1 is extraordinarily capable. Don't underestimate it. It can detect that one object is farther away than another. Complete the phrase, bread and... You already said butter, didn't you? Recognize a voice on the phone instantly. Read emotion on a face in less than a fraction of a second. Navigate a familiar room in the dark. Drive a car on an empty road. And it does all of this in parallel, effortlessly, without your permission or awareness. This is evolution at its finest. System 1 evolved to keep us alive. A creature that had to consciously deliberate before running from a lion would not live long enough to reproduce. Speed was survival.
The problem is not that System 1 is bad. The problem is that System 1 doesn't know what it doesn't know. It jumps to conclusions, it fills in the blanks, and it does all of this with full confidence. Kahneman introduces a brilliant acronym that explains this. WYSIATI. What you see is all there is. System 1 doesn't search for missing information before making a judgment. It builds the best story it can from the information it has. And if that story is coherent, it feels true. It feels right. It feels certain. Here's a chilling example. Someone meets a person named Ben at a party. Ben is well-dressed, speaks confidently, and says he runs an investment fund. Within seconds, System 1 has already decided. Ben is trustworthy, Ben is successful, Ben is worth listening to. Later, when Ben turns out to be a fraudster, System 1 doesn't apologize. It was never designed to. Kahneman describes the halo effect, one of System 1's signature moves. If you like someone, you tend to believe everything about them is good. Their looks, their intelligence, their intentions. If you dislike them, the reverse happens. Politicians know this. Marketers know this. Now you know it too. And then there's priming, perhaps one of the most unsettling findings in this entire book. In one famous experiment, participants were asked to arrange scrambled words into sentences. One group got neutral words. Another group got words associated with old age. Florida, wrinkled, forgetful, bingo. When the experiment ended, the old age group walked out of the lab significantly more slowly than the control group, without knowing why, without being told, without any awareness at all. The words they...
I am not exaggerating. These are peer-reviewed studies Kahneman cites in the book. One more System 1 concept that will blow your mind.
cognitive ease. When something is easy to process, when it rhymes, when it's in clear fonts, when you've heard it before, your brain signals that it feels true, feels right, feels safe. This is why repeated exposure to something, even the lie, can make it feel more believable. This is why advertising works. This is why propaganda works. Repetition creates cognitive ease. Cognitive ease creates the feeling of truth. Kahneman found that stocks with pronounceable ticker symbols outperformed those with difficult names, at least in the short term, right after going public. Mere ease of processing. That's all it took to shift investment decisions worth millions of dollars. Now meet System 2. If System 1 is the autopilot, System 2 is the pilot who steps in when things get complicated. System 2 is deliberate, effortful, and slow. It handles complex calculations, rational arguments, and careful choices. When you're filling out your taxes, debating a major life decision, or trying to understand a legal document, that's System 2 doing the heavy lifting. But here's the critical thing. System 2 has a limited budget of energy. It gets tired. It gets overwhelmed. And when it does, it outsources more and more decisions back to System 1. This concept is called ego depletion. The idea that mental effort draws from a limited pool of willpower and cognitive resources. The more your System 2 works throughout the day, the harder it becomes to resist impulses, make careful decisions, or resist the quick shortcuts of System 1. This is why every major productivity guru tells you to do your most important mental work in the morning. It's not a vibe, it's neuroscience. Your System 2 is freshest then. System 2 believes it is in charge. It tells the story of who we are, but mostly it is a supporting actor who has convinced itself it's the star. The deeply uncomfortable truth about System 2 is its laziness. Kahneman demonstrates this with what he calls the law of least effort. Given the choice between a simple mental operation and a complex one that yields the same result, the mind will almost always take the easy path. This manifests in something called substitution. When System 2 is asked a hard question, it quietly swaps it for an easier related question and answers that instead. And it doesn't tell you that it's switched. Here's an example. A pollster asks, "How satisfied are you with your life these days?" That's a complex, multidimensional question. But if you were in a great mood 5 minutes before being asked, maybe you found $1 on the street, your System 1 has already colored your emotional state. System 2, being lazy, doesn't carefully analyze all dimensions of your life. It asks itself, how do I feel right now? And uses that as the answer. The question being answered was not the question being asked. Kahneman's own research showed something remarkable. The harder a cognitive task is, the more your pupils dilate. He could literally watch System 2 working by watching eyes. When a task became too hard, beyond a threshold of effort, participants would simply give up and let System 1 take a guess. The pupils would contract, the answer would be wrong, and the person would feel confident. Now, you might be thinking, but surely smarter people have stronger System 2s. Surely intelligence protects you from these errors. Kahneman says, partially. Higher cognitive ability does reduce some biases, but not nearly as much as we'd hope. Smart people are often just better at rationalizing the conclusions their System 1 already reached. They build better stories to justify their gut feelings and call it reasoning. In fact, Kahneman introduces the concept of what he calls intelligence is not enough. You also need what he calls rational thinking disposition, the tendency to question your own intuitions, to seek disconfirming evidence, to slow down before deciding. And that disposition is not measured by any IQ test. The cognitive biases that rule your life. All right, we're now entering what many people consider the most practically useful part of this book. The catalog of cognitive biases that System 1 generates and that System 2 fails to catch. I want to be clear, these are not rare quirks of broken minds. These are universal features of human cognition. You do these. I do these. Presidents do these. Surgeons do these. Nobel laureates do these. Kahneman himself admits he still falls for them, even knowing the research intimately. Let's go through the most important ones. The anchoring effect. You were shown a random number, say the last 2 digits of your social security number. Then you were asked to bid on a bottle of wine. Studies show that people with high anchor numbers bid significantly more than people with low anchor numbers, even though the number was random and completely unrelated to wine. The first number you encounter anchors your subsequent judgment. It pulls your estimate toward itself, like gravity. Negotiators use this. Lawyers use this. Real estate agents use this. The first price mentioned in any negotiation is an anchor, and once it's planted, it's almost impossible to fully uproot. Research shows that whoever names a salary first in a job negotiation sets the anchor. If you say $80,000 first, the final negotiated salary will likely be much closer to $80,000 than if you'd waited. Even when the other party knows the first offer was arbitrary, they adjust insufficiently. This is why career coaches universally advise, let the employer go first if you don't know the range, or anchor high if you do. The availability heuristic. Which kills more people in the United States, stroke or car accidents? Most people say car accidents. The vivid, dramatic news coverage of crashes makes them feel more common. But stroke kills nearly twice as many Americans each year. Strokes just don't make for dramatic news. The availability heuristic is System 1's rule. If I can easily remember examples of something, it must be common. If I struggle to recall examples, it must be rare. This works most of the time. Common things do tend to be easier to remember, but it fails catastrophically when dramatic or emotionally charged events dominate memory, regardless of their actual frequency. This is why flying feels more dangerous than driving, even though driving is statistically far more lethal. The images of plane crashes are more available, more vivid, more emotionally charged in our memories. The representativeness heuristic and the famous Linda problem. Here's one of the most replicated findings in all of cognitive psychology. Read this carefully. Linda is 31 years old. She is single, outspoken, and very bright. She majored in philosophy. As a student, she was deeply concerned with issues of discrimination and social justice and participated in anti-nuclear demonstrations. Now, which is more probable? A, Linda is a bank teller, or B, Linda is a bank teller and is active in the feminist movement. In Kahneman and Tversky studies, 85% of respondents said B. But B is logically impossible. The probability of two things being true together is always less than or equal to the probability of either one alone. A subset cannot be more probable than its parent set. But B feels more like Linda. It matches the story System 1 built about her. And that feeling of match, representativeness, completely overrides basic logic.
This is called the conjunction fallacy. Adding plausible details to a story makes it feel more probable, even when adding conditions mathematically decreases its probability. Lawyers use this when constructing narratives. Conspiracy theories thrive on this. The richer and more detailed the story, the more it feels true. And the less statistically likely it actually is, it actually is. Overconfidence, the king of all biases. Kahneman dedicates significant space to what he considers the most destructive bias in human decision-making: overconfidence. We systematically overestimate our knowledge, our predictive ability, and the certainty of our beliefs. In one study, people were asked questions and then asked to give a confidence interval, a range they were 90% sure contained the correct answer. If their calibration was perfect, the correct answer should have fallen inside the interval 90% of the time. In reality, it fell inside only about 50% of the time. Experts were worse. Doctors, lawyers, financial analysts, professionals with years of experience who have strong incentives to be accurate showed more overconfidence, not less. Their expertise gave them more confidence, but not proportionally more accuracy.
We are especially overconfident about our ability to predict the future. Kahneman calls this the illusion of validity, the feeling that our predictions are reliable, when in fact they are barely better than chance. One of the most practical offshoots of overconfidence is the planning fallacy. We consistently underestimate how long things will take, how much they will cost, and how many things can go wrong. The Sydney Opera House was supposed to cost $7 million and take 4 years. It cost $102 million and took 14 years. The Scottish Parliament building, budgeted at £40 million, came in at £414 million. Nearly every major construction project in history has experienced massive cost and time overruns. And yet we keep planning optimistically. Because when we make a plan, we imagine it going right. We don't vividly imagine the things that will go wrong. That failure of imagination is System 1 telling System 2 a comfortable story. And System 2, eager to avoid the discomfort of uncertainty, accepts it. This is the work that won Kahneman the Nobel Prize, prospect theory. And once you understand it, you will never look at money or any kind of gain or loss the same way again. Traditional economics had a model of the human being, the rational actor. This creature evaluates outcomes based on their absolute value. If a choice gives you $100, it's worth $100. Simple, predictable, rational. Kahneman and Tversky showed this is completely, demonstrably, scientifically wrong.
Loss aversion. Losses loom larger than gains. Here is the central finding. Losing $100 feels approximately twice as bad as gaining $100 feels good. We are not symmetric about gains and losses. Losses are psychologically heavier. They hit harder. They linger longer. They motivate us more powerfully. This creates irrational behavior everywhere. Kahneman often used this. I'll flip a coin. Tails, you lose $100. Heads, you win X. What does X need to be for you to play? Most people say around $200. They need to win twice as much as they could lose just to feel it's worth the risk. If losses and gains were weighted equally, $101 would be enough. The fact that you need $200 reveals loss aversion in action. Kahneman introduces the concept of reference points, the baseline from which we measure gains and losses. And here's where it gets fascinating. What counts as a gain or loss depends entirely on what your reference point is. A surgeon tells you before the operation, the chance of death is 10%. You feel terrified. The same surgeon tells you, the survival rate is 90%. You feel reassured. It's the same information, but 10% death is a loss frame. 90% survival is a gain frame. Framing changes everything. Politicians know this. Public health communicators know this. Advertisers absolutely know this. The same fact can be presented in ways that produce wildly different emotional responses and decisions purely by choosing what to call the baseline.
The sunk cost fallacy, throwing good money after bad. Loss aversion produces one of the most common and costly errors in human decision-making, the sunk cost fallacy. You've bought a concert ticket for $150. The night of the concert, you feel terrible. You have a headache, it's raining, the traffic is awful. A rational actor would say, the $150 is gone. That's a sunk cost. The question is only, given how I feel right now, is attending this concert worth the discomfort? And often the honest answer is no. But almost no one reasons this way. They go to the concert because they already paid. They sit there miserable because leaving feels like losing the money twice. The sunk cost fallacy keeps people in bad relationships. I've already invested 3 years. It keeps companies pouring money into failed projects. We've already spent $50 million. We can't stop now. It keeps nations fighting losing wars. We've already lost so many soldiers. The money is gone. The time is gone. The question is only ever, what is the best decision from this moment forward? Kahneman describes one of his most fascinating distinctions near the end of the book. We have two selves, the experiencing self, the one that actually lives through moments, and the remembering self, the one that tells the story afterward. These two selves want different things, and they experience time differently. The remembering self judges experiences by their peak intensity and their ending. It ignores duration entirely. A vacation that was wonderful for 9 days but ended on a bad note will be remembered worse than a 5-day vacation that ended beautifully. This is called the peak end rule. The endowment effect. We overvalue what we already own. In a now famous experiment, students were randomly given either a coffee mug or a chocolate bar. They were then allowed to trade if they wanted. If preferences were rational and random, about 50% should want to trade. In reality, less than 10% did. Each group overvalued what they had simply because they had it. Giving something up feels like a loss. Keeping something feels like avoiding a loss. And since losses hurt more than gains feel good, we cling to what we own far more tightly than logic would dictate. Real estate markets exploit this. Sellers emotionally overprice their homes because they can't help feeling that selling is losing. Product trial periods exploit this. Once you've owned the product for 30 days, returning it feels like a loss, making you far more likely to keep it. The overweighting of rare events, lotteries, and terrorism. Here's another finding that overturns common assumptions. While we are generally loss-averse, we have a strange relationship with very unlikely outcomes. We overweight them. We pay far more attention to them, and they affect our behavior far more than their actual probability warrants. This is why lottery tickets sell. The probability of winning is essentially zero. Rationally, you should never buy one. But the vivid, imaginable, exciting possibility of winning, however remote, gets overweighted. It feels real in a way that essentially zero does not. It's also why terrorism, statistically far less deadly than car accidents or heart disease, reshapes political priorities and causes massive societal disruption. The vividness, the deliberateness, the unpredictability of the event makes it feel far more probable and more threatening than the numbers justify. The emotional impact of a loss, a vivid image, or a story will always beat a statistical abstraction in the minds of System 1. And System 2, tired and lazy as it is, rarely bothers to correct the imbalance. Regression to the mean, perhaps the most misunderstood concept in human life. Kahneman shares a story that changed his career. He was teaching a class of Israeli Air Force flight instructors. He told them praise works better than punishment in training. One instructor pushed back angrily. Every time I praise a cadet for a perfect landing, their next landing is worse. Every time I yell at a cadet for a bad landing, their next landing is better. You're wrong. Punishment works. Praise doesn't. Kahneman had a realization. The instructor was right about the observed pattern, but completely wrong about the cause. What was actually happening was regression to the mean. An extraordinary performance, good or bad, tends to be followed by a more average one. Extraordinary bad landing, probably a statistical outlier. Next one will be closer to normal, better. Extraordinary good landing, statistical outlier. Next one closer to normal, worse. The instructor's praise and punishment had almost nothing to do with it. He was rewarding and punishing the regression of randomness and inventing a causal story around it. This misunderstanding ripples through everything. Sports commentators explain slumps. Doctors think their treatments are working. Teachers think punishment is effective. Fund managers think their strategy is brilliant until regression reveals it was mostly luck.
So where does all of this leave us? We've covered the architecture of thought. 2 systems, one fast and automatic, one slow and deliberate, and the constant, mostly invisible negotiation between them. We've seen how even the smartest people in the world, doctors, judges, economists, military commanders, are not immune. And now comes the most important question. What do we actually do about it? Kahneman is careful not to promise a cure. You cannot rewire System 1. You cannot turn off your automatic thinking. And he wouldn't want you to. It is magnificently useful. The goal is not to eliminate System 1. The goal is to recognize when you need to call System 2 off the bench. His prescriptions are practical. First, slow down for important decisions. Don't let cognitive ease masquerade as truth. If something feels obviously right, that's precisely when you should be most suspicious. Second, build external checks into your decision-making process. Ask someone who disagrees with you to explain why. Genuinely listen. Use pre-mortems. Before launching a plan, imagine it has failed catastrophically and ask why. This forces System 2 to engage with uncomfortable possibilities. Third, respect base rates. Before predicting how your startup will do, ask what percentage of startups in this category succeed. Before estimating a project's time.
Daniel Kahneman said, "The best we can do is a compromise. Learn to recognize situations in which mistakes are likely and try harder to avoid significant mistakes when the stakes are high." Thinking Fast and Slow is not a comfortable book. It doesn't tell you that you're smarter than you think, or that your gut is wise, or that you can trust yourself. It tells you the opposite, with extraordinary rigor and evidence. And that, paradoxically, is what makes it one of the most empowering books ever written. Because knowledge is the first step. Understanding that your mind has these patterns, these beautiful, evolved, often problematic shortcuts, means you can at least pause. Notice. Ask, is this System 1 talking? Does this feel right because it is right, or because it is familiar? Am I avoiding a loss more than I'm pursuing a gain? That pause, that small, deliberate moment of awareness, is System 2 doing its best work. And over time, practiced consistently, it might just make you a little wiser, a little more accurate, and a lot more honest with yourself. If this resonated with you, drop a comment below telling me your biggest takeaway. Was it loss aversion? The Linda problem? Regression to the mean? If you want to read the full book, and I strongly encourage you to, the link is in the description below. Every chapter has gems we didn't even get to today.